Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Let's start out today's video. We're going to be ranking all 88 brawlers in the game right now, from the very worst to the very best. This is mainly going to be in competitive, ranked, whatever you guys want to call it. So that's where the meta is being judged from. It's going to be a lot different from maybe casual play, maybe 3v3, maybe showdown, etc. This is 3 versus 3 competitive slash ranked. So first and foremost, we're going to be jumping into the F tier, starting off with the worst brawler in the game, in my opinion. It is Doug. So Doug does have a couple of use cases, especially in Snake Prairie, but elsewhere he's just terrible. So in the F tier we have Mr. P. So Mr. P has dropped down in my estimates, and he's just absolutely unusable right now. He's not even good against snipers. I think every single assassin, tank, healer composition just run absolutely through him. He has no purpose in the meta. Next up in the F tier we have Pam. So I believe firmly that Pam has to be in the F tier. I've not seen Pam in competitive for at least like 6 months now. She gets ran all over. All the meta brawlers just literally abuse her. She's literally just a super totem. Big thick mama is not good anymore. And lastly in the F tier we have Bonnie. Do I even need to say it anymore? Bonnie's just trash. She's only rarely good in heist. Outside of that, terrible. So now moving on to D tier brawlers, starting off with Charlie. So even after several buffs, Charlie's still not meta. She's just getting outclassed by pretty much every single brawler. There's not much else to say. She's not been used in competitive or scrims. So with the D tier we have Hank. So I promoted Hank from the F tier to the D tier, mainly because I feel like he is being underrated. That might be because I've just made Hank such a meme where no one wants to believe he's actually decent. The tank trait actually made him okay. Maybe he's secretly C tier. Next with the D tier we have Grom. So Grom is just way too predictable for the pros. He's just not that good into pretty much anything right now, and especially with all the hypercharges coming out with the speed boost, it makes it even harder to use him. It doesn't really pack the same punch either. Next up we have Ems. So Ems is definitely D tier. I don't know how many times I need to put Ems in the D tier for people to realize she's not good. In 3 versus 3, yeah, she might be okay and usable, but in competitive she's just not good. She gets outclassed so easily. She's not been used in so long. She's never used in practices either. She's just not good. Next up we have Bo. So Bo is one of my personal favorites because I feel like he might be a little bit slept on in this meta, but I'm kind of just waiting for his hypercharge event. I feel like people will just learn how good he is, but still there's just better options most of the time, but he's still okay. Next we have Bull. So Bull is just absolutely terrible. He's only good in heist, and that's only if you want to make it into like a base race. So if you really just want to go full out attack onto the high safe with the hypercharge, etc. But yeah, way too predictable and just not good. So with the D tier we have Edgar. So Edgar's actually not as bad as I thought in this meta, mainly because a lot of the big damage dealers did get nerfs, but still I just don't think he's used often enough. Like, he's a good counter pick sometimes in some maps, but I just don't think the map pool really favors him. So with the D tier we have Fang. So another brawler that's just not used in pro play whatsoever. Competitive practices, he's just fallen off. He's just not used. There's no use case for him. I think he's only really good on open maps against snipers, but you'd just rather go something else. Next up we have Jackie. So again, for the casuals, then we'll have a really tough time facing off against Jackie because of the hypercharge, the speed boost on grassy maps, but pros just know how to keep the distance, know how to pinch Jackie out, and it's just free for them. So yeah, she's not good in pro play. Next up we have Sam. So again, Sam is just not the greatest. A good Sam player can always make things work, but I still think even in this meta, Sam mains really do struggle. There's just too much going against him, too many hypercharge brawlers, and he's just too predictable. Next we have Miko. So Miko did receive a good HP buff, but that wasn't enough to put him in the top of the meta. It only really helped him as a use case maybe against throwers in some instances, but still he does lack the DPS because his reload speed is so slow. Next with the D tier we have Meg. So this might be a big surprise to a lot of people, but Meg has really fallen off. I was always in a weird spot with Meg, not knowing where she was really sitting, so I'd always place her kind of in the middle of the pack, but I think it's quite clear that she's really fallen off. She's just not the damage dealer that she used to be, and since that HP nerf, I think it actually has killed her because she hasn't got the survivability, very limited range. In draft it's so easy to counter her, especially in the Lu meta. There's just so many brawlers that walk all over her. She was actually the second least used brawler in pro practices, just going to show she has literally no use case, so of course she's got to be low on the meta tier list. And lastly in the D tier we have BB. So again, for the casuals, BB is actually going to be pretty good because of the hypercharge, and they don't know how to counter counter it, because you do need a bit of team play, but most brawlers will just win that 1v1 interaction so easily. She doesn't have a purpose, maybe inside of hot potato, but still with so many better tanks. Yeah, she's never used in pro play whatsoever. So now moving on to the C tier brawlers. So these are just a bit worse than average. You know, they might have the use case, but more often they're not actually that good, especially in ranked. So first off, we've got Mo. So Mo has really fallen off. I thought he might actually be underappreciated, but the more I've tested him out in ranked, I just get ran through so easily. He just doesn't have the DPS to keep up anymore. It's such a slow shot, and pros agree as well, because they just don't use him in practices whatsoever. So he's definitely maybe even D tier. So in the C tier we have Chester. So I know people are going to shoot me for this opinion, but Chester might even be back at the D tier, mainly because he's in the bottom 10 usage rates in practices. So maybe pros are underrating him again. I don't know, but there's just too many damage dealers that are better right now. I didn't think the nerfs actually would have made that big of an impact, but they really did. He wasn't seen in the recent competitive tournament either, so yeah, he has fallen off. So we have Chuck. So Chuck is only good in heist, too easy to read in other game modes. There is going to be the odd Chuck main, which will make things work, especially against casual players, but pro players, especially in a Lou meta, Frank meta, they just destroy Chuck. So in the C tier we have Spike. So the pros really don't use Spike, mainly because they can juke out curveball too consistently, but still he's just not in the greatest spot. Because it's Spike and you can kind of just be okay in so many different instances, he's probably just in the middle of the pack. So we have Rosa. So I'm not really seeing Rosa being used too much in this meta, even with Max and Sandy being such prevalent brawlers in the meta. I'm not really seeing her used too much. I don't know whether that's just, again, maybe she needs a little bit of a buff. I don't know, she's just getting outclassed at the moment, so C tier is fair. Next up with the C tier, we have Clancy. So Clancy's not being used by the pros whatsoever. I feel like they might be underrating him just a tiny bit, but he's only really good as maybe like as a defender in heist against Chuck, but there's just better brawlers later in the tier list. So we have a Ruff. So the pros think he's actually okay, mainly because like he's usable in a lot of different situations. His hype charge wasn't as good as I expected, but he's still just okay. The pros will always find more value out of Ruff. So we have a Willow. So she did receive that buff, which helped her out a little bit in the meta, but still, just because it takes so long to try and defend herself, one of her star powers is actually bugged, and there's just a million bugs with her anyways. She's just okay in the meta. Next up with the C tier, we have Sprout. So Sprout is starting to fall down a little bit. He's still okay because he's good in like knockout. You can only really pick him later on in the draft though, because he doesn't like the DPS to keep up. Next up in C tier, we have Shelly. So again, Shelly's just only really used a few times when you're really scared of facing off against those tanks, and if other tank counters are banned out. So she still serves that purpose, but she's getting worse and worse as the days go on. Tara is next, and again, this might be a brawler that's popular in the casual player base, but for the pros, they don't really like Tara too much. She's only really good in like Snake Prairie, Double Swoosh, a few other gem grab maps, not really used elsewhere. So Nani is next, and I know Nani's good at countering the sharpshooters, but I still don't see pros pick Nani too much unless there's literally like 2 sharpshooters that you can counter. Of course, the return to sender gadget is pretty good, and you can get away with playing Nani in a lot of instances if you're a good Nani player, but definitely dropping down in the rating. So in the C tier, we have Shade. So a lot of people, including myself, were pretty wrong about Shade upon release. I thought he looked really good, but turns out he was just a noob stomper, and he's only really good on a certain few maps where, you know, typically you might see throwers, because I think the problem with Shade is of course his attack delay, and also the fact that it takes so long to actually cycle his super. So people know how to play against him now, and he's not the greatest. With Jessie, we've seen as the metas have gone on, she's just getting worse. She's still not like terrible, and she can be good into tanks, hot zone, some usability in heist, but again, her hype charge just seems to get less and less value. Mortis is next in the C tier, and the only reason why he's even in the C tier is because of the hype charge. The hype charge absolutely carries him. Without it, is absolutely terrible. So again, pretty good noob stomper, but only really used as a late pick and ranked on like gem grab. So in the C tier, we see Squeak. So Squeak really isn't that good in competitive play right now. Even as a late pick, it doesn't have the like punch that it used to have. Even against squishier brawlers, it just isn't as good. His hype charge is really underwhelming as well, so he's starting to fall down again. Next with the C tier, we've got Gale. So again, I did literally predict that he would fall off. People would still put him in the A tier for whatever reason, and lo and behold, he's not being used in scrims as much. He wasn't used at all in a recent competition at the weekend, so just goes to show that he's not really good anymore. Next up, we have Leon. So Leon is just kind of okay in so many different instances where you'll never ever first pick him, but there might be the odd occasion where in like knockout, for example, I've seen him being used, maybe a few instances in hot zone, you might get some good use case for him. But yeah, elsewhere, I don't know, he's just not really that good. So with the C tier, we've got Buzz. So I'm actually starting to see him used a lot less, maybe creeping towards the D tier. I think he's like okay, and his hypercharge definitely does carry him. I think without it, he'd be really, really bad. So with the C tier, we've got Mandy. So I'm kind of confused because Mandy technically has got a buff from like the rework that they did, but she's just getting worse in the meta for whatever reason. I don't really know. I think it's maybe just the compositions and the meta around her in Knockout and Bounty aren't really favoring her. She's not being used by pros whatsoever, really. Again, I'm surprised. So she's dropping down. Next up in the C tier, we've got B. So I feel like B might creep up into the B tier, mainly because you've started to see a lot more like Griff and brawlers that open up the map, so making her a little bit better. But still, I feel like there's still something missing about her. Maybe the hypercharge will give her a new lease of life. Next up, we have Primo. So Primo's been used a fair bit in pro play, but it's mainly going to be in Brawl to counter those pesky tanks and also just to get easy goal scoring opportunities. You don't really see him elsewhere, so C tier is fair. Next up, we have Colt. So again, Colt is going to be really good for the casuals, but early the pros really go him in Heist, and I'm starting to see him less used in Heist as well. He used to be always like a first pick in Heist, and he's not even that right now, so he's falling down. And lastly in C tier, we have Dynamite. So it pains for me to say it because I still see personally Dynamite as a B tier brawler, but after looking at the data and just seeing that he's not actually that much of a threat as a late pick in this meta, so of course his usability's gone down. So now moving on to your B tier brawlers. So he's going to be meta in a couple of game modes, and of course just a bit better than average, or maybe still just on the average side. So starting off with Tick. So Tick is a little bit of a funny one because in ranked he's always really good in Knockout and Bounty. I feel like he is getting worse though, but it's just still Tick. He still always remains meta. Next on the B tier, we've got Lily. So Lily I think is pretty underrated, I would say, mainly because I don't really see the usage rate for her being too high in pro play, but I think she's still a really good pick. I've seen her used in a few tournaments, and I think Lily's good in the right hands. You just got to make sure that you're not wasting that super. The Vanish gadget is just so broken, still making her a meta brawler. Next up with the B tier, we have Meeple. So I was really struggling on where to put Meeple. Some people think Meeple's good, but I think Meeple's in a position where it feels like you're playing Jean. Really slow reload speed, but you can definitely impact the game, but you can't team wipe. You can't carry people with it, so it's kind of frustrating playing Meeple sometimes. But in terms of 1 versus 1 matchups, really broken, so good. The pros aren't going to be playing Meeple for like another month, so yeah, I think B tier probably where Meeple's at. Next we have Cordelia. So Cordelia is always stuck in the B tier because that super is just so good at countering that one brawler that's really pesky. Any brawler that you're scared of, you can always draft Cordelius just to counter with the super, the hypercharge. On top of that, just so good. So we have Crow. So again, Crow is really good in Heist with the hypercharge. He's also got some interesting use cases in like Gem Grab, Brawl Ball, Hot Zone, but I'm starting to see him used a little bit less. I know he's seen as like an okay counter to healers, but at the same time he doesn't have to damage to keep up with the healer meta. Next we have Lola. So Lola is starting to see a lot more usage rate last meta. And then again, it's a funny period where she's starting to be picked less and less. I still think she's pretty good. It's just that she's pretty uninteresting to play. So she's used a lot when the tournaments come around, but not in ranks, etc. Next up, we have 8-Bit. So 8-Bit's hypercharge hasn't really helped him in the meta, but it's still 8-Bit. He still does a ton of damage, and he can be a safe gem carrier. He can be really good in Heist, but again, often underrated. So with the B tier, we have Carl. So Carl is surprising because he hasn't got a hypercharge, and there's still so many brawlers that can like feed off him, but at the same time, pros know how to utilize Carl with a flying hook, and then if it's a harder matchup, you can switch to fire gadget and Heist, etc. The pros still really love Carl. Next with the B tier, we have Brock. So since the HP buff, it's allowed him to be good in the places he was good in the past, if that makes sense. So maps like out in the open, just situations where you need to open up the map, he's decent. You know, sometimes he can be good in Heist as well, but again, if they don't fix his hypercharge super, I think he's going to keep dropping in the meta again. Next with the B tier, we have Barley. So it pains for me to say this, I was kind of feeling like he was going to drop down in his meta a month ago, and he definitely has. His usage rate has completely plummeted. He is good in some instances, but I think with a healer meta and with just so many aggressive options, they can overrule Brawley just too easily. So with the B tier, we've got Kit. So Kit, sometimes I'd say the pros overrate Kit, but you kind of see how they use him. You know, of course he's good in Knockout, and of course he's good in Heist on Bridge Too Far, but yeah, pros kind of use him too much. Like for example, I've seen him using like Shooting Star, but then I've seen him use really good in Knockout to counter snipers. So I'd say B tier is fair. Next with the B tier, we have Colette. So in terms of the pick rate for pros, Colette is easily an A tier brawler, but I just think she's definitely overrated because the win rate just isn't there for her in pro play whatsoever. And I've just find Colette's only good once you open up the map completely, but there's just better tank counters out there. She's only really good in Heist in my opinion. So with the B tier, we've got Poco. So I was a little bit wrong with my meta prediction a month ago with Poco. He's got better in the meta. I don't even know why. He just pairs really well with certain aggro compositions. His protective tunes gadget's really good against meta brawlers like Lou, for example, Frank, any kind of stun, poison, etc. So he's getting better in like Brawl, Hot Zone and Gem Grab, but he's definitely not A tier because the usage rate still isn't completely there. Next on the B tier, we have Draco. So Draco has definitely improved a lot in the meta. Some people would argue A tier. He definitely is an S tier, by the way, but yeah, I think B tier is pretty fair for him because, again, he will need that certain healer or something in the composition to get him and help him cycle his supers, but once he does, he's definitely very dangerous. So he's good in Hot Zone, good in Brawl, good in Gem Grab, but still, I don't see him used enough to really call him a complete meta brawler. And lastly in the B tier, we have Otis. So again, another brawler that can be considered A tier. Otis is just pretty good everywhere. He's really good in Gem Grab, really good in Hot Zone, Brawl as well, any grassy map, good at countering tanks, good at scouting the bushy maps with his vision gear and his long attack. So Otis is pretty good. So now moving into the A tier brawlers. So these are considered really meta options. They're not of course busted everywhere, but definitely really strong in the meta. So we're starting off with Griff. So Griff, I'm going to put it here because the pros are valuing Griff a lot more since his super damage buff. I don't actually think he's A tier, but just because he's good at like countering a lot of different aggro compositions, breaking up the map, combining with other brawlers, the super damage is a lot right now. Some pros even say he's S tier, which I just can't believe myself, but yeah, he definitely is a lot better than I gave him credit for with the buff. Next with the A tier, we've got Buster. So Buster's just pretty much always in the A tier because, again, like his shield is just so good at causing pressure and deflecting so much damage, pushing up the map. The gadget is just always so good and so good at confirming kills, and he's just good pretty much everywhere. Good Buster players will always do something on the map. Next with the A tier, we have Ash. So Ash definitely is an S tier. I think people have figured it out, like of course because you can still like deal a lot of damage to him, and because he doesn't have a tank trait, that doesn't charge his hyper charge is what I'm saying, but still he can really work on certain bushy maps. He's definitely back in the meta, but not as broken as once feared. So next up we've got Melody. So again, she definitely is an S tier like some people were saying, maybe even B tier because the usage rates for her are literally sky low. She's only really good on like more open maps. The bush of the map, she's just terrible because you can still run her down. The hyper charger is really good, but I feel like you have to wait for the perfect situation to play out to get the maximum value out of it, so it's a little bit weird. And with the super charge rate nerf as well, she's not actually as good as a 4. So in the A tier we have Pearl. So Pearl is just so consistent, so good in so many different situations. Knockout and bounty, the pros absolutely love Pearl because she's tanky. You get within her range, one gadget, you're pretty much dead. Good at countering those tanks on those game modes that you're really scared of them. And also you've got like Gem Grab and some other maps where you're allowed to fully heat up with Pearl, like Last Stop, and you just can't defeat her in lane because she deals so much damage. Next up in the A tier we have Maisie. So I underestimated Maisie a little bit in my last meta tier list, but I still maybe think A tier is reaching. She is good, and you know, in Hot Zone and a few other instances like Brawl, she can be really deadly, but still it just takes the right composition to make her work. She definitely is an S tier, nowhere near. The usage rate is so low in pro gameplay. She's not actually picked that much for EMEA. In NA, they think she's broken, but that's just not the case. So in the A tier, we have Janet. So definitely a welcomed return to the meta for Janet. Well, you're saying that, but she can actually be really toxic, especially with the hypercharge. If you know how to use it correctly, you can deal so much damage with it. And of course, Janet, just being the brawler she is, it's just really annoying to face her in lane and Gem Grab, Brawl, Hot Zone. Of course, you can counter her with a low DPS, but still, she's just so annoying. Next up, we got Sandy. So Sandy is still really relevant in the meta. There's so many good situations you can go Sandy. And the good thing about Sandy, even if you're just getting outdrafted by a bunch of tanks because of the low DPS of Sandy, well, you're going to get a lot of supers. You're going to get a lot of hypercharge supers. The stun is so good with Sandy as well. Brawl, Gem Grab, you get so much use case out of it. So in the A tier, we have Kenji. So Kenji is still really relevant in the meta. You've just got to think more before you just dash in and smash auto aim now since the reload speed nerf, but he's still really good. The gadget's still good, star power, the mobility, with the damage, everything about him is still really good. 28 here, we have Gray. So I still think Gray is underrated, by the way. I think once people realize how to use the hypercharge effectively, I think he might even be considered S tier in pro play. But yeah, Gray's still really good gadget. Again, the hypercharge is super good. There's just so much like different ways to play Gray. Knockout and bounty, good to counter snipers and throwers once you get your super. Hot zone, of course, really good. You can pair Gray with tanks in all other modes as well. Next, when you're 80, we have Byron. So I was starting to think that he was going to drop down in the meta, and then within the past few weeks, he's just been used so much in pro play, even though there's like a slight bug with him where he doesn't charge his shots super with 3 shots anymore. He's still pretty good, and especially now with the healer meta, he's even better. So when you're 80, we have RT. So he's always in the A tier. Literally always. RT is so good at knockout and bounty. The reason being is because people have figured out now, because he has a lot of HP, you can easily get like a couple of taps onto a sniper and then gadget, and they're dead in knockout and bounty. Or of course, if you're facing off against aggro, switch to gadget where you literally just hard counter brawlers like Kit, Daryl so easily with his super. There's so much to like about RT. Next up, we have Larry. So Larry's still really good in pro play. We're actually starting to see the usage rate drop a little bit for the twins, which is alarming. But at the same time, I just think they're still so annoying. Maybe because people just ban him out so frequently. Me, myself, I've got to ban him out because the twins are just so good at everything. They're good in every single game mode and pretty much every map. Next for the 80, we've got Nita. So Nita's still really consistent in the meta thanks to her fast charge and hypercharge. It only takes 2 supers to get that hypercharge bear, which is just devastating. It has so much HP, which although it hardly ever reaches the opponent, it just eats all of their ammo up. So Brawl Ball, Gem Grab, she's just so good. Next for the 80, we've got Piper. So Piper's still really solid in the meta. Main reason being is because she's got a fast charge and hypercharge, and it's literally just up to the user. She's still got really high damage, so if you can just get some taps in, you're easily going to carry. Of course, really good in knockout and bounty. Can be used as gem carry, can be used in other situations as well. She's just really solid. Next minute 80, we have Belle. So this is one that pros love so much in draft because there's hardly any bad matchups for Belle, because if you've got tanks, well, you can just switch over to the grounded star power, which is pretty underrated, and then in most use cases just use shield star power, which, you know, as long as you're tapping, you're always getting value. Really good gadget. And again, it's Belle. You can pretty much go Belle everywhere. She was in the top 10 most picked brawlers in competitive play, so you just know that she's always good for pros. Next minute 80, we have Eve. So Eve's quite surprising just because I didn't actually think the hypercharge would have been as good as it is right now. The reason why it's so good is because of knockout and bounty. Well, there's just so many sharpshooters and they just get destroyed by all of those hatchlings. There can be up to like 11 or 12 hatchlings just chasing them down, which just leads to more map control, and that's the reason why Eve is so good. She was already like drafted a little bit before hypercharge. I mean, she was overrated in that instance, but with the hyper, it's just really helped her in the meta. And like all these heist maps as well, they just have so much water, so of course she's going to get even better. Definitely an 8-tier brawler now. Next minute 8-tier, we have Rico. So if we're talking casual play, if we're talking ladder, Rico is absolutely S-tier. He's so busted and so annoying with the gadget, the hypercharge, etc. But he's an 8-tier because pros know how to counter him. There are ways, and you can only really pick him later on in the draft, really, except for a few maps. Of course, there's a few maps he absolutely dominates in, but yeah, he's the one brawler I actually want to see a nerf, so yeah, please just nerf him. Next for the 8-tier, we have Surge. Surge is still really prevalent in the meta, one of the most used brawlers in competitive. He's just good because he can shut down tanks so easily. You can't be as dumb anymore, like you can't just brainlessly jump in now and just know that you're going to survive. You definitely got to pick your moments a little bit since the HP nerf, but still, the hypercharge, it just gets charged so quickly. He shuts down tanks so easily. Still 8-tier. So for the 8-tier, we have Daryl. So Daryl is still a meta brawler. He has gone down the rankings a little bit. It's just because there's just other brawlers with hypercharges that are just fancier. But yeah, Daryl's still really consistent because he's good as a late pick and knockout. He's just good as a late pick pretty much everywhere because those two roles will literally forever make him meta, in my opinion. So next, in the 8-tier, we have Berry. So some people think he's S-tier or the best brawler in the game. That absolutely is not the case, but he's definitely edging top 10. I would say borderline, but the reason why he's not S-tier is because it's not actually being used that much. It's the map pool. The map pool doesn't really favor him too much. Also, other throws are actually pretty good into Berry, but yeah, he's really good in hot zone. Few instances and maybe Brawl Ball, some cheesy compositions going on. Maybe good in hot potato, but still, like his hypercharge is making him really good right now. But I don't think it's as good as some people are making out. Next, in the 8-tier, we have Gene. So Gene's still always going to be consistent in the meta, knockout and bounty. He's always your guy because, again, Gene Pool can just literally win you the game, especially knockout. All you need to do is get one kill, and that wins you the round pretty much all of the time. And of course, you can do that easily with Gene. His vision gear just allows you to scout those bushy maps so easily. There's so much to like about Gene. The next up in the A tier, we have Amber. So Amber is borderline S tier. Me, myself, I just don't see Amber being an S tier brawler, but I can see why people think that, because she's just so good at everything. She's just that brawler in ranked or competitive play where you can pick her and it's like, well, Amber will always do a decent job because she's got good range, good damage, good super. She can defend herself against tanks. She's just really annoying, good map control, etc. So much to like about Amber, and of course without a hypercharge. So imagine Amber with a hypercharge. And lastly in the A tier, we have Angelo. So I would put this pesky mosquito in the S tier, but I can see why A tier is probably more fair for him. There's just so many good maps for him in the rotation, just makes him so annoying. That 4K shot, just everything about him. Oh, I hate him. So now moving on to the S tier brawlers in the meta. So these are the best of the best. They're being used all the time in pro play. Good win rates, good usage rates in practices. Just really good in ranked as well. So starting off with Frank. So this is my, not really hot take, but more my personal opinion. Even though he's not drafted the complete most in pro play, I just still think he's so powerful. The hypercharge cycle's so fast. Since the rework to him, he just winds up his attacks so fast, deletes people in an instant. A good Frank player will completely carry, and I feel like in draft you've always got to have in mind, well, we need a damage dealer, because what if they pick Frank later on the draft? Because if they pick Frank later in the draft, they can just walk through your team because he has so much HP as well. Yeah, I just think he's still S tier. So in the S tier, we've got Max. So Max is definitely in the S tier right now. The balance meta is really helping her out, but for pros, they really know how to make Max work because she's just good into everything. The hypercharge is just really broken, getting 3/4 of his super, good in every single game mode, and you can never go wrong with Max in draft because, again, it's all about just helping your team perform better. That's just Max. You're never going to carry, but you're going to be able to do a lot. She had a 100% win rate in a recent tournament in EMEA as well, just going to show how good she is. She's in the top 5 usage rates as well. She's so good in this meta. So now moving on to your top 5 brawlers, starting off at number 5 with Gus. So Gus, it's Gus. He's so good in this meta. That damage buff was just too much for him. The reason why he's so good as well is because the projectile is just so big and so easy to hit. So you can just start chaining like crazy, chaining Kooky Poppy gadgets, which just add to the damage as well. The super allows you to defend yourself. Pairs really well with a bunch of aggressive brawlers. Probably the best gem carrier right now. Can be played in hot zone as a mid. You can play the knockout and bounty into snipers because he's got a decent amount of HP. There's so much to like about Gus. Absolutely S tier. Next was the 4th best brawler in the meta. I went with Penny. So in terms of practices, she's the most used brawler, going to show how versatile she is. Again, she's not like any crazy broken brawler, but the hypercharge is just really quick to charge up. The turret is really hard to take down. Again, she can defend herself against aggro. There's just so much to like about her. The recent range buff really helped her out. You can play her pretty much everywhere. So good. Next up is the 3rd best brawler in the meta. We have Stu. So this should be no surprises because the hypercharge is just so busted. But yeah, Stu's just good into everything. I guarantee a pro Stu will always get value and pressure on the map. Also, this is a pro tier list, so the pros can use them a bit better because of better devices, better ping. It's a very ping dependent brawler, but still a good Stu player can get so much value and pressure on game modes like hot zone. He can get so much work done on Brawl Ball, gem grab. He's been played everywhere right now. Now I'm moving into the 2nd best brawler in the meta. I went with Juju, so this might be a little bit controversial, but I still think Juju is top 2 brawler, maybe even top 1 in the game. Juju's so good for the pros. She was like the most banned, also played brawler in competitive recently. She's always banned out for me because you can never go wrong with going Juju. Pretty much every map, every mode, there's going to be a way to use her. Of course, she's got 3 different attacks with the gadget, which is just so busted, getting invisibility, speed. The slow is so good on the water-based map. The long range is so good on maps with a lot of walls. It's just really hard to push into her as well, with her super being really annoying, dealing a lot of damage, a lot of HP, and the slow start power. There's just so many broken things about Juju. Okay, so now moving into the best brawler in the game right now. This might be a hot take for some, but not to me and not to the pros. Lou, I think, is the best brawler in the game right now. There. I said it. Who would have ever thought? Lu is so broken in the game right now. The reload speed buff just made him far too good. It's like impossible to juke out his main attack because of how fast he shoots and how quickly he unloads. And then his super on top of that is so toxic, paired up with the hypothermia star power, which is really good. The gadget, which frees them for half, which is really good. The hype charge is completely broken as well. You can chain it so quickly. It's just so hard to push into Lu. I'm seeing Lu used as a mid and gem carrier. That's how good he is in the meta. He's been used in knockout. That's when you know Lu is good. He's been used in knockout to counter Daryl, Pell, etc. He's been used in Brawl Ball, Gem Grab, Hot Zone. He's probably even used in Bounty. He's used everywhere in the meta. I think he's the best. The reload speed buff just made him so incredibly good. He can shut down everything in the game. He's one of the most used brawlers in competitive practices. I could go on and on and on. He definitely is the top 3 brawler in the game at least, but he's my personal favorite in the meta. So that's going to be it for today's video. I know I said 88 brawlers, but Buzz Lightyear I'm not going to put on the list because he's not in competitive or ranked, but he probably is the best brawler in the game. Yeah, he is above Lu, but this is ranked, of course. So that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.